You just sit in your corner and look away, right? And nobody puts Dawn in a corner. Welcome back to the Bible recap discussion. That's Dawn. That's Tyler. This is
I don't think so.
And I'm Josh. Welcome back. It's week 25.
Just about there.
I'll admit, once you first said in your corner, I was thinking about that introduction.
Yeah.
The whole time I was there. Like, hold on to it. So welcome back. Thank you again for joining us. Week 25, and we get into the whole book of Ecclesiastes. We read Kings chapter, lost my spot, 10 to 14, 2 Chronicles 9 to 12. We finish Proverbs, so 27 to 31. So we cover a lot of ground, and I'll admit, for me, Ecclesiastes is one of my top 5.
Yeah.
But I think that's just because I've heard some really good sermons on it, and so I'm always drawn to it. So.
Yeah.
Anyways, so again, if you had a chance to read that, hit the pause button, read it, come back and join us. And Dawn is going to kick us off with the first question.
All right. Question number 1. Read Proverbs 28:5 aloud. This verse frees us from trying to be understood by those who don't love God. What's something you thought was foolish before you started following Jesus, but now see as wise and good?
All right. Evildoers do not understand what is right, but those who seek the Lord understand it fully. Honestly, for me, it was going to church. I always went to church as a kid and kind of had the mindset once I got to my teenage years of like, God knows I believe in him, and like I don't need to go spend an hour a week. Like I only get so much time with school anyways to myself. That was hard for me. And then as I actually got closer to God, and honestly had kids, and like, okay, like this is really needed. Like I need this in my life. Like there's more than just sitting and listen, or going through the motions. So yeah, I think it's really wise and nice now. Good. Whatever terms you want to use.
I agree with that. I just might add that having a church family, having somebody to keep you accountable, I didn't feel was necessary probably before I started following Jesus more closely, and also reading the Bible. Those are my 2.
For me, it is a sense that I live and serve others and not just pursue myself. So before I became a Christian, it was, about me, myself, and I. Mm-hmm. And, that's so drinking and all the other stuff, was priority because I was having fun. I was doing things that I want and not realizing the damage it was doing to myself, but also how I was viewing and treating others in that. And so something I thought was, be foolish was, the goody two shoes or, the square. And of course, part of the problem is that culture, feeds into that narrative. Of course, I kind of made a Dirty Dancing reference, but that's a great movie reference that, the main character baby is like, she's open to this whole world that's fun and exciting, and her parents are square and limited. But, looking back, I was like, I really, ran over some people that I shouldn't have. I should, in a sense, should have known better. And that's where in the other small group that got started last night that I was at, and I shared a little bit of my story, and someone made the comments like, "Oh, I don't have a dramatic come to Jesus moment like that." I'm like, well, that's good. I mean, because. If I run across any of those people, the first thing I'm thinking is I'm apologizing, and there's been times in my life where God's like, you need to go ask forgiveness of that person. You just need to make the out of the way effort, and so you're not carrying around that stuff. So don't be embarrassed of good upbringing, because it saves a lot of heartache and headache and embarrassment, because you don't know what effect you've had on people's lives when you're just living for you.
That was very true.
Seems like God knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
I think there's a whole book about that.
Yeah.
There is. Oh Oh, goodness. Thank goodness for Jesus.
Yes.
All right. Number 2, read Ecclesiastes 4:4 aloud. I've got that pulled up if you don't already.
I do. Yep.
You do? Okay. Do you agree with the preacher's summary here? Why or why not? How have you seen the vanity of comparison stealing your focus from the eternal things God has called us to focus on?
And I saw that all toil and achievements spring from one person's envy of another. This is meaningless and chasing after the wind. And a chasing of after the wind. Have they seen the vanity of stealing your focus? I've not seen it steal the focus on God, but I've seen it steal joy from people. And I think that is kind of goes hands in hand with the focus on God for a lot of people. Just what I'm kind of getting from this, it's kind of like the saying, keeping up with the Joneses, kind of is what I kept coming to. You know, I have to have, a nicer car, a nicer house. Like I keep thinking of high school too. Like when I was in high school, it was a big thing to have the Nike graphic tees, or not the Walmart ones. You had the Nike ones.
Abercrombie and Fitch.
Yeah, Abercrombie and Finch, Aeropostale.
Mm-hmm.
But keeping yourself up when you don't really need that. Like now I'm wearing $9 member mark polos to work every day. Like, and I think being so worried about what other people think and not who you truly should be worried about steals a lot of joy.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I agree. I mean, that's what I put, that it's when you're trying to, I think to a certain point we've all done it and probably continue to do it a little bit. Because you're trying to either resemble your peers that you think are have something more that you don't, and you want to show them that you're that same person. And then again, it does strip the joy from you when we really should be focusing on our eternal home. And so I'd say material things is a big thing for me. That probably in my younger your age, it's tough.
Yeah.
When you see other families, maybe get the nice homes, the nice cars, and maybe just have it a little bit easier than you, and you struggle with why I don't have that.
Yeah.
So it's easy to fall into that category. So I do agree with it, that I think he's kind of spot on. And somehow, if we can just change our minds to focus on what our eternal home is, and work on who we are instead of what we are.
Yeah.
I think, so the comparison game. So one of the things I was thinking is like, okay, where does that come from? And so I think the two biggest, I think there's other, reasons, but I think the two biggest is fear, FOMO. We can use FOMO here, but also entitlement. So a couple just examples, because videos are out there to see. And so you think about entitlement. I think because the one that's just set in my mind is that the videos of those kids who are demanding the next phone because it's the new one.
Yeah.
Everyone else has it. Jimmy down the street, his parents bought him the new one, whether that's true or not. And then the parent will say no, and the kid will, I'm going to break it. And then there's a standoff, and the kid breaks the phone. It's like, well, So I think entitlement's, one of the big part of it's also fear, because now we have this phrase called FOMO, fear of missing out, to where I think, and let me say this, I think it'd be interesting to survey the motivations for those who will stand around a block in line for the next iPhone or for the next whatever comes out, is trying to dig down what's really going on. Why do you need to buy this phone just because it's coming out? Because I think that will help give us some more depth into the question of the comparison game that Solomon here figures out thousands of years ago, and that's where I think for me, Ecclesiastes really helps with for me, it helped with anxiety. Because he's like, once you realize that, chasing money, chasing knowledge, chasing pleasure, having the best job, at the end, all doesn't mean anything. What matters is love God and keep his commandments.
Yeah.
After all this journey right there at the end, and of course he says it twice.
Yeah.
The full purpose is love God and keep his commandments. And once I'd attached to that, any fear, anxiety I've had with either public speaking or in the stuff that, I dealt with, from my past, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we see the rise of anxiety, and so that's where I'm like, maybe we should just give Ecclesiastes a read, because you might find something about yourself and about God that might actually free you. And that's, of course, add on to the comparison game question. So I kind of went big
there. No, there's nothing wrong with that. All right, number 3. What did you think of the preacher's experiment in Ecclesiastes? Did any of his conclusions surprise you?
I think I already gave my answer to this question.
Yeah. I put no, that it really wasn't surprising to me that, and I just kind of put something simple here, because this one was more of trying to, I think I was overthinking it, so I tried to do a simple answer. It's just the Lord will provide in our times of need. If we need something, he's there, as long as we're there to ask him for help. We don't need, like we were saying, the whole comparison game. And so, yeah, I think I'll go ditto.
I agree. Yep.
Yeah. I think I was adding just the thought that just came. Solomon, he's not just talking about it, he's done it. Yeah. Which should help highlight for some folks is he's not just speculating here. He's not theorizing or philosophizing. I threw my life into my work. I mean, he was king. I mean, he had a really good job, a really big job. But even at the top, it was like this. It's all pointless, because one day I'm gonna die and I'm not gonna be able to take any of this with me. He gained wisdom. Well, I'm gonna be dead, and there's this fool here. He's gonna be dead. Yeah. We're both gonna be equally dead. I can make a lot of money, but I don't get to take that with me.
Yeah.
And the pursuit of pleasures, like it wore out. I mean, the new car smell disappeared, and trying to deal with 700 wives and 300 concubines probably got exhausting.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is from a lived experience, from someone who, especially for so many people try to reach the top or be millionaires. I mean, he was on the top, and started on the top and lived every aspect of it fully, and of course, realized that at the end, love God, keep his commandments.
I happened to watch a video, and it was just talking about, based off of like today's time of inflation and everything, like what the richest people of all time, and they do a bar graph, and it had Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and they're up there, they're like top 10, and then you just see this bar that just goes out of nowhere, and it's actually Solomon. It's considered, he's considered the richest person in the world, so it was kind of cool that it just happened to line up. I watched this video, and we're learning about Solomon, or reading Solomon's words. So, not anything to do with the question, but it just kind of reminded me of that when you were talking about him having everything he'd ever want. So, but yeah.
And he died anyway.
Yeah, still died.
Yeah.
Gifted up, and his son gifted up, and all that got taken somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a whole nother.
Yeah.
Speaking of entitlement.
Yeah. That might be a later question.
Yeah.
It was tough. All right, number 4. Despite having all the blessings of wealth and power, Solomon still makes sacrifices to gods besides Yahweh. These pagan sacrifices are generally offered in hopes of getting more. Have you ever seen synchronism creep into your own life? What other sources of spiritual power, astrology, psychics, mantras, manifestations, etc., have you been tempted to look to for help? Have you done that?
There was one I think I was just fooled, in the sense just to see, how big of an idiot I was as a kid. Because as a kid, sometimes you get greedy and you want more, and so I can't remember. I read this thing where you can call for your own individual genie, and of course, remember I'm like 8 or 9 or 10. I mean,
not old.
I love it.
And they gave you the instructions. You're supposed to sit in a dark room, stare at a corner or a space, and repeat genie, genie, genie for like 2 minutes, and it didn't work. And I found Jesus not much happier and less foolish, less to fall for stuff like that.
Oh my!
I couldn't tell you where I read it either. I remember reading it somewhere and was like, "Ooh, I need to try this. I want stuff."
Yeah. I just had the thought of karma, even up to 3 or 4 years ago. Like I thought didn't realize it was a Hindu belief, but just what goes around comes around type of thing. Like pretty much what karma is, I guess. So, and then realizing really what it was, and I think our last small group we had a pretty good discussion about a lot of these. That's
also going to be one of the topics of the other podcast.
Yes,
going fully into.
Yes. Be ready. Yeah, it's and like obviously I had things as a kid, watching Aladdin and things like that. You want a genie, or you read your astrology in the paper or whatever. Like I'm not really truly believing it, but
horoscope. Or
yeah,
yeah.
I think never something I really was tempted into looking for better things, I guess, but just curiosity, I guess, more than anything. So
what I find interesting with when Christians use karma, they don't really have an understanding of karma as far as the Hindu sense, because you in your life in the Hindu build up good karma or bad karma, and it's life cycle. And so what goes around comes around, in a sense, is that we apply this karma language to what's actually a biblical concept of you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
The natural consequences.
Yeah.
But for some reason we use karma, but I think part of that is the influence of some of those yogis that were popular in the 60s and whatnot, and just impacted our cultural language. But I think it is still a form of syncretism, but it's also not a fully understood when people actually apply it.
I think we're anxious to apply that to somebody else, but when you said reap what you sow, that kind of applies to me, but karma applies to Ty.
Yeah.
If I see something happen to him, like, well,
karma.
Mm-hmm. But
it's rude, I guess.
And then it's based on a subjective understanding, because we could be a total jackwagon, and it's like, well, why didn't that happen to Tyler? I'm a good person.
Yeah.
And of course, someone is, probably who should be paying attention to me, like, according to who?
Yeah. For sure.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Do you have anything else?
nope.
Okay. Number 5, has your view of Proverbs 31 changed at all over the course of our study? If so, how?
Big old fat question mark on this one.
So I answer these questions usually about an hour before we do them, just because that way it's on top of mind when I do
Karma.
it. Yeah, karma, right? So I want to say good old yes and no. I think it's changed. Like if I would have read this, early last year before we started this, I would have read it very literally. Where now I'm kind of reading between the lines with Solomon, like understanding kind of like if this is truly words of Bathsheba, understanding his like Solomon saying like learn from me almost like when he's writing this. I feel anyways, like, and then kind of like the understanding of the perfect woman is kind of what I got from the backside of 31 on things to look for in a wife. I don't think, and that's kind of where I'm getting to the no part, I guess, is 31. Like I felt like I could have read that at any time and read between the lines, I guess.
The truth of that one.
And then whereas before, not quite understanding, like I knew Solomon was a wise person, had a lot of money, but not really that just his true wisdom that he spoke in the Bible. So that's what I'm saying, and I'm sticking to it. What's
your thoughts? Give me more.
Give you more. Yes, Your Highness. So I've been, I guess, in this study. I mean, I've come back to this, and I really haven't changed a lot, just because I've done my own theological, biblical interpretation work. But I think I can go back to, especially when we started Job, was, the Bible kind of talks about a virtue ethic. But when it gives a picture like this, it gives kind of an idealized, in a sense that also should not be taken fully literally. Because the goal is that when, especially in the Hebrew culture, is that they use pictures to help describe something. Yep. So it's not that saying this is a checklist. It's like this is a picture of what's, in a sense, what the ideal does look like. Yeah. But I also think, too, we can look at such a description or list and just completely overwhelm us. Yeah. Have you ever gone searching for a job, look at the qualifications and requirements and whatnot, and think, oh my goodness, who can do this job? And you get hired once you're in it, but like, I can do this. Yeah. And so that's where I think, again, I think sometimes we can still blow things up in our minds, in a sense, or read it as 21st century Americans, and miss the point of how, Solomon is relaying this, the information. Because again, they'll use pictures. That's why for us, we'll talk about God as mighty and strong, where they'll be like, God is a rock, He is a fortress. They're painting a picture. Yeah. God's not literally made out of stone, but it's giving an image that's easy to connect to.
Simile.
Metaphor.
No,
that's a Guardians of the Galaxy reference.
To continue with that, like, I was listening to her and Tara Lee when she was talking about, like, she doesn't withhold up to 31, and if someone does, like, I need you to be my mentor, like, she did kind of go in and it's like, this isn't something that someone is going to be all the time. You're not going to check every single thing on here. You're going to be more of, at this time in your life, you'll have this, and then you'll learn from these experiences to gain other things from the woman's perspective, I should say. Like, you're not, like she was talking about, like, for men, this is something to look for in a wife. Right. And then as for a woman, this is a kind of like a
I was thankful building for blocks. Her, the way she detailed. So, we're not expecting you to do this within 24 hours.
Yeah. So this is a growing.
I'm like, I'll never match that. But I've done a few of those.
But
hashtag goals.
I'm not even sure they're goals anymore.
I will say, I did like how she shortened their names in the book to King Ray and King Jerry. So I even had to write it down in here because that's how I kept hearing it. So it was hard for me to try to. Normally, when I listen, I can get the names after a while when she says them.
I'm just thinking of all the hard words, really. Those two.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've had worse.
Yeah. I can't shorten. Some of them can't even pronounce even after hearing it.
What was the one I wanted to say, Mike?
Which one was that?
But,
Mephibosheth.
Yes.
Yeah. See how that just rolled out? He's got to practice enough times so you just spit it out.
Look at that. I mean, see, I was already doing what she suggested later on.
Maybe she got in our books and listened to the podcast. Tara Lee, we'd love to have you on if you'd want to come to Burlington, Kansas.
Yeah. come on out to Burlington, Kansas.
Yeah, we have a spot.
Yep. And we do have another mic and stand ready to go.
Yeah. All right, number 6. Is that me? No. Yeah, is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it is. After King Ray, older trusted advisors told him to be kind to his servants. He goes to his friends and asks for their advice, and they tell him to dial up the oppression rule. What does it reveal about King Ray? That he seeks and follows the counsel of his friends instead. To me, he doesn't really want wise counsel. He just wants some yes men. Do what I don't want to do this. I'll find counsel and the people who agree with me, and I'll keep going until I have that. And I think it's something in today's age that we see a lot, to me, I can tell who's someone's truly a friend of mine when Don, is my wise counsel, I said last week, because Don's not afraid to tell me, hey, Tyler, that's kind of ridiculous, or that's maybe you need to look at it from this angle. And I very much appreciate it. But if I would hear that from Don and then go to Josh and I get the same answer, but then I keep going until I find someone that I can, that's not what we want, Even if I remember right, Solomon says, go seek wise counsel, not go seek yes men. So I think that's all he's doing.
I do too. And I think he was seeking what he wanted the answer to be.
Yeah.
And I think we do that a lot. We go to the people that we
Yeah.
know will tell us what we want to hear, instead of maybe the hard truth. And God's ways were just hard. You don't want to deal with that.
Yep.
Well, and if you look at it for both Rehoboam and Jeroboam, that they just wanted more.
Yeah.
And so for Rehoboam, it's like, this is the process how he got rich. Mm-hmm. And so if this is how he made money, I could make more money just doubling down. And of course, things go completely south.
You would think someone so wise, though, would name his kids something that didn't have half the the name the same.
But and so of course Rehoboam did not have this the gift of wisdom, but also part of that is parenting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when you throw yourself into so much, build up your own stuff, and you're occupied with 700 wives and 300 concubines, and with all those kids, are you really taking care of your family? No. And so is your successor, really going to be someone who could step up and lead wisely, or are they going to be a jackwagon and cause problems? And of course, now we see Rehoboam causing problems because he's about me, myself, and I.
Back to your entitlement.
Yeah,
I think that's too
a product of the environment.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think
he acts like a teenager.
Yeah,
teenagers. I mean, I was an idiot. Got advice from my friends where I should ask my parents or somebody over the age of 30 for advice. And so to me, it is because I think he's 40 something or whatever.
Yeah,
he's older, but I was like, this guy sounds like he has the mental capacity of a teenager when it comes to reasoning and getting intel.
This really just reminds me of there's several movies about it. Black Sheep, Tommy Boy, the dad, Billy Madison, one of my favorite movies, but
basically the Adam Sandler movie.
Yeah, Chris Farley from the 90s. But dad builds an empire and a business and corporation. Decides, I'm going to hand this over to my son's very entitled, thinks I'm going to rule, and it all falls apart once son takes over and dad leaves, or dad has to come back to fix it. So that's another thing that just kept coming into my mind. It's like this is pretty much a lot of movies today and a lot of everyday life. Hey, my dad. And also it always seems like Solomon's not this, but in today, there's more millionaires that came out of poverty than who were given. Mm-hmm. And same way with billionaires. There's very few billionaires that have inherited their money or inherited something and built it. And I think it just comes down to the ease of life. And I think kind of with Rehoboam, and Jeroboam, like they've never had to work a day in their life. So like I don't know how hard this is, how hard it is to go build something, because I've always been in the palace and done nothing else. So just a thought that popped in the head, but
It's a good thought.
Yeah. It applies.
It plays. The nose does play. Sorry. My mind went on Ocean's 13. Just that banter is just I find the banter hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, the nose plays. Yes, the nose does play.
Oh my. Number 7.
Yeah.
Read 1 Kings 12:15 aloud. What role is God playing, and what happens with King Rehoboam and his advisors, and why? Do you have that?
I
Or
do.
I can find it for you.
Just trying to make sure, because I was trying to read this earlier. So the king does not listen to the people. For this turn of events was from the Lord, to fulfill the word of the Lord has spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Elijah of Ahijah. I can't think of the prophet. Ahijah of Salonite. Probably not the one that should be reading these with, but
Ahijah.
Ahijah.
Or Hijah.
Ahijah. I completely lost what I'm saying. So if anyone else wants to start, that'd be great.
Well, it says, what role did he play? I feel like he played the role. He'd
Yeah.
already set in motion what was about to happen or what needed to happen.
I think God gave him the chance to do what was right. He listened to his brain instead of his heart, and started the separating of the kingdom. Yeah.
Well, we see in the last, few words about Solomon, where he's basically undermining himself, and it basically sets the stage for this whole thing.
Yeah.
Especially, causing Jeroboam to leave, and someone who's, just from gleaning, an attractive personality, is good at his job, and is liked by the people, to where God knows that his son's going to step into the throne and just totally mess it up. And so, I think, God has, there's no plan B, a distraction plan A. That's a Will Smith reference.
I should have started counting in this podcast, because I did at church. How many times?
But that's just the wisdom of God, that He makes plans, and then He intervenes, or He acts when it's to make sure that His plan's fulfilled, and to make sure that the people are going to respond to what He needs them to do. Because again, we're not puppets, but God's also very aware of human nature and how we respond.
I will say, I've kind of just epiphany here. David always seemed to apologize for when he did wrong. Solomon, being as wise, I reading, I don't ever remember a time where he's just like, sorry God for what I've done. It was more of just like, I'll ask for help, if that makes sense. So I could be wrong, but I'm not.
See, I took it as you're talking about that. David apologized for Solomon. Oh, I got wisdom. I'm good.
Yeah.
And then you have that over certainty of yourself being passed on to your kids. Well, if Dad was good, I'm fine.
Yeah.
No, Dad did this. I'm good.
Yeah.
So I think your observation's good.
What he said.
I'll stop interrupting.
It's okay.
It's all right.
All right.
Keep going. What do you got, lady?
I started, remember?
Yeah.
I already got mine in.
8.
So, okay. And we kind of talked quite a bit about this event anyways.
Yeah.
Anyways. All right. Number 8, King Jeroboam's fears led him to control and idolatry as he tries to duplicate God's temple in the northern kingdom. What would have been an appropriate response to his scenario and fear?
I think just looking to God for wisdom, follow. And his dad, one of the few things I feel like, not few, but one of the things his dad did pretty well is asking for wisdom and ask for help. And instead, he kind of let his pride get in the way, and his fear of losing his people by letting them travel south. He just, I'll build a temple, and the first thing he did was put 2 idols in there.
2 calves. 2 bulls.
Yep, back down to what the Israelites did with Moses. So, I did catch that one.
Yeah.
I think it's a good lesson for us. We can't fix everything ourselves. And that's one thing I kept thinking about is there's a lot of times I will suffer until I can do it myself because I don't want to ask for help. Where there's a lot of times that I could just ask God for help. I don't need to ask everyone else or have God give me the grace to feel comfortable enough to ask for help.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and when she asked what would be an appropriate response, and my first thought was, well, duh.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
What do you want us to say here? I mean,
Well,
the appropriate response was to ask God, but.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So here's what I think is interesting. So I'm going to retrace what we've read. And so during, of course, Judges and especially with David, we have this behavior with Judah and the other tribes, especially the Ephraimites. Jeroboam is an Ephraimite. And of course, we have to remember thinking too, is like, the guy who led us into this nation and this countryside, Joshua, was an Ephraimite. And so we have this tribal, separation stuff going on. And so I don't think it's any coincidence that Jeroboam comes from the tribe of Ephraim. Yeah. That God uses probably the competitiveness or the comparison game of the tribes that fuels some of this. And that's where I think for Jeroboam, his default was, I got to solidify what I have, because why would I want to trust those the Judah tribe guys? Yeah. Because they've been running the show, and we're the ones who led the 12 tribes into the promised land. It was Joshua. He was one of ours. And, of course, focusing on self, not on what God ultimately wants. And so I think that's one of those things that's going on in the background. But also too, when God affirms Jeroboam that this also is going to happen, he also says, I'm going to keep my promise with David. Now, if anybody knows anything going on about the promises for Israel, would know about the promise of David that, his line would last forever, and that there's this king who's going to be sitting on the throne in Jerusalem from the tribe of Judah. And so, if you're view yourself in competition, it's like, I'm going to want to avoid anything that could reunite and for me to lose the power that I've been given. So I think there's this human element. Of course, God knows what He's doing. Again, this amazes me, how God has all these things worked out. I think that's some of the stuff that's going on in the background. And so that's where when God strikes down the man of God who violates it, who believes a lie, but he thought it was thought it was truth, that God actually said, what, change of plans, which is a natural human response, but it's like, no, I told you X, Y, and Z, and you need to follow X, Y, and Z. And so, human nature and human selfishness and sin is just run amok. But I think the historical stuff, we got to just keep that in mind, because I think that it just it makes sense because, like, even Judah as a tribe grew to one of the largest early on, and he was not the oldest son of Jacob.
Yeah.
He was not the second oldest either. So, sibling rivalry here at its finest.
Yes.
Played out at a national level with eternal consequences. So. Good question. Good question.
It is. All right. Number 9. Based on what you've seen from both kingdoms so far, the northern kingdom of Israel with King Jerry and the southern kingdom of Judah with King Ray, which kingdom would you prefer to live in and why? In this division, which kingdom do you think God will show more favor and mercy?
You already answered that one.
Yeah. I said neither to first, but if I had to pick one, I said southern at first, but now I kept going back and forth because obviously to me, both are bad. Once I've got to, there's not really one I would want to live in. Originally I said the southern because they're following God's rule more closely. Whereas this northern, I felt like he's starting to bring in a lot more idolatry, kind of just willy-nilly putting priests in there. But then I'm also like, I don't really want to be working twice as hard as what the other guys were. They also have the Egyptians coming in and probably doing things I don't want to be a part of. So I don't know. I'll live on the border. I'll be Switzerland.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I first said neither too, because neither one of them sounded like too pleasant. But trying to put yourself in that time, I'd probably go back to Rehoboam, because, of course, I mean, they're the ones that at the end repent, and I feel like God favors them. Yeah. So I would want to be with the one that God favors, and then, as you just said, that will be the line.
Spoiler alert: things are going to be worse for the Northern Kingdom a lot sooner than for the
Yeah.
I changed my question. So I said the border.
I would want to. Immediately, my thought was like, I'd want to be in Judah because that's where the temple is. And so, having access to the temple to worship, to offer sacrifices, putting myself in that time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would endure the hard work just so that I could be a part of it. Have access to the temple.
Yeah. I changed my answer.
In that, of course, in that time. Of course, now we don't need temple, but in that time, I would want that access.
Yeah.
That's probably a very pastor answer, but it's true.
I need the place. All right, number 10 are God shots.
Lead the way, sir.
All right. I have day 169. I will get there at some point. Starts off with, the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts the Lord is safe. Many seek the face of a ruler, but it is from the Lord that a man gets justice. That is Proverbs chapter 29, verse 25 through 26. The approval of others is fleeting. If we seek it, we'll be forever imprisoned by needing to gain or maintain their affirmations. On the other hand, God's approval of us in Christ is immovable. It's the only thing about us that doesn't change, and it's the only thing about us that lasts. God's perspective is fixed, and his plan will be accomplished. He's not fickle. He knows the future because he's already there. He knows all the ways they've yet to screw up and sin and rebel against him, but he has set his heart on us forever. He never goes away, and he is where the joy is. I just really liked her putting that verse in at the beginning. Just kind of, I'm going to read it again. For the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. We have a lot of things going on today that makes it really difficult for us. And some of it is we're just difficult on ourselves, where I think just the trust and following the path that God has set is what we need to do. So, yeah.
Trust and obey, because there's no other way.
That song was in my head yesterday.
Yeah.
My goodness. I woke up with it. Okay, so I don't know if other pastors, if any other pastors watching, let me know if this happens to you or for anybody. There's times I'll wake up and hymns are going full blast in my mind. I'm I don't remember dreaming about worship, but for some reason I am waking up.
Yeah.
Even though I'm going, but my brain's going, trust and obey. That's happened to you. Let me know, because it happens regularly. So.
Okay, my God shot was day 173. Of course, because he speaks or she speaks of women here. But if a woman fears the Lord, delights in God, trusts God, stands in awe of God, she's ultimately relying on him for everything that makes her the strong, dignified, praiseworthy woman we've seen described here. If we drill down, that means God is also and ultimately to be praised for who she is. This woman isn't the hero. She points to the hero. She finds her strength in the hero. She's granted her wisdom and dignity by the hero. She's great for sure, but she points to someone far greater, and he's where the joy is. Of course, I love that, because even when they're talking about, what's good in a woman, to me, when we are worthy, it is when he makes us worthy, and by acknowledging him, and he is our strength. So I love that one.
Very true. Very true.
So mine was day 170. And this is what it says. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. Chapter 3, verse 14 from Ecclesiastes. We strive to gain things that are fleeting and exhaust ourselves over a vapor. But here we see that everything God sets in motion is immovable. It lasts. We can't add to it or take from it. It's fixed forever. How powerful he is and how weak we are, he's where the joy is. And it just reminded me, as I shared earlier, just the fact, God has got this worked out. And so why are we freaking ourselves out or making ourselves anxious over some of these things, to where, he's the man with the plan.
Yeah.
So,
And it's in motion.
It's in motion. And what he creates lasts, and that's where we, shouldn't pursue the things that are vapor. Like dust in the wind. Sorry.
All right, Kansas.
Well, okay, so in the Jewish Study Bible, part of the translation for vanity, they talk about as air or wind.
Yeah,
and so that's where that came from.
I think she talked about it in here too.
Mm-hmm. But it's more prevalent in the Jewish Study Bible. So, anyways, that wraps us up for week 25. We're glad you guys joined us. And so next week, for week 26, I'll get the list out here. Of course, we get back in the 1 Kings, and so that's chapter 15 to chapter 22. 2 Chronicles, picking back up at chapter 13 and going to 18. We're still not done with the Psalms. We've got Psalms 82 and 83. And then we tackle one of the minor prophets, Obadiah. It says chapter 1, but I think Obadiah is just the single chapter, if I recall correctly. So
I remember putting my tabs in, I believe so.
So that'll be good, but it'll also be a quick reading. So thank you very much for joining us. Again, that's Tyler, Queen Donna, and I'm Josh. Take care, and God bless.
Bye.